Welcome into Unbreakable, a mental health podcast with Jay Glazer. I'm your host, Jay Glazer. And, the guest I have on right now probably doesn't know how special he is to me. And the reason why I say that is you just meet some people along the way in your journey, in my mental health journey, that for me, I just go, oh, man, this guy just resonates with me. And I feel like there's help around the corner for me. And that's who he is. His name is Jim Kwik. He is a brain coach, a podcaster, writer, entrepreneur, just came out with Limitless, a book, which is a bestseller across everything. And, Jim, I appreciate you joining us.
There are like 6 things that people could do that could really move the needle. Like, for example, your brain.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do these 6.
Yeah. When I wrote Limitless, it was endorsed heavily by the founding director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Brain Health, by the top Alzheimer's researcher out of Harvard University.
That's pretty damn validating, buddy.
Yeah, and I appreciate it.
Cool.
And I appreciate, because I have the opportunity to speak at these institutions or at the hospitals, to train their doctors, their caregivers, their researchers, their patients, but about 1/3 of our brain's potential is predetermined by genetics or biology. But more than 2/3 is in our control. And so there's certain things that we could do to move the needle. And again, good brain health is just a better mental health. So, a good thing to recommend, like I use acronyms a lot to help them, especially people are listening. I know they might be driving, they might be working out, and they might not have access to notes. But you take your meds, right? And what I would say is, here are some meds that are really cost nothing and they have 0 side effects, and it's an acronym, right? So, and I didn't come up with this. I don't know who to credit this to, but meds, MEDS. Actually, Brendan Burchard recently, he wrote Motivation Manifesto, came out with Meds RX, and I'll give it to everyone here. And I'm just going to share some of my take for it and some of the research. The M stands for meditation, right? And we know there was a study, it was a joint study done at NYU. And I think it was Virginia Tech. It was just a few years ago in 2018, I think. And they found that 8 weeks of guided meditation, just 13 minutes a day, had a huge impact on mood of the participants. It enhanced attention span. It enhanced working memory, recognition memory. It also helped with anxiety, helped improve overall emotional regulation. So, meditation for me, and I've done, a dozen podcasts on it. It's something that I just take 10, 15 minutes. I think it's important nowadays to disconnect so that we could reconnect. Our brains aren't meant to go 100 miles an hour all the time. And sometimes it just like with your phones or any part of technology, if it starts to slow down or overheat, sometimes you have to unplug it, right? To be able to, most things work better when you unplug it and plug it back in later.
Good point.
And so, so meditation's my jam, and certainly people could just Google my name, meditation, and go through, my process. But, and again, I would say meditation for me has never been about becoming enlightened. It's, for me, it's a training tool that if my mind goes somewhere, and invariably will, I pull it back to my breath or something in my environment or some word or mantra. And it's me flexing my focus muscles. So I could train what I want to focus, put my attention, the spotlight of my mind on at a given time. It also reminds me of meditation that it's not about controlling our thoughts. Like, people think, there's a misnomer that people think that in order to meditate, they have to just have an empty mind and no thoughts. That's impossible. And so like our heart beats, and asking our mind to stop thinking is like asking our heart to stop beating, right? That's the purpose of a heart. It beats. And our purpose of our mind is it thinks. But the purpose of meditation is not to control our thoughts. It's realizing that our thoughts don't have to control us all the time, right? And so I think it's a great practice, and certainly all the benefits for mental health in terms of anxiety, reducing stress, reducing blood pressure is powerful.
Well, I think for meditation also, if I can, real quick, it gives us a break when, for those of us with mental health issues where, my depression, anxiety, if I meditate for 10 minutes, that's 10 minutes. Those roommates in my head aren't saying bad things to me.
Yeah. And that's reason enough to, yeah. And some people say, well, I don't have 10 minutes. Honest to God, if we don't have 10 minutes, then we should be meditating for like an hour.
Right.
That's probably a reason that we need to do it more often. But I really feel like I'm at a disadvantage if I don't do it, and I think part of self-care is prioritizing our time.
Right.
That when we say yes to somebody or yes to something, we're not saying no to ourself. Part of self-care is putting borders and boundaries around the things like our emotions, like our mental health, like our time, and the minutes that make up our life. Meds RX, the E in Meds RX stands for exercise, right? Again, something just like meditation, it's free. I could quote study upon study, where there's one actually just a few years ago in 2015 at Cambridge University, where they just had participants, they tested them cognitively, multiple cognitive tests, and then they tested them after like 30, 60, 90 intervals, like of vigorous of exercise. And they came back and they just did better on focus. They did better on mental acuity. They did better on memory tests. Generally, what's good for our heart is going to be good for our head, and so, but also it also helped for hours after the exercise. It improved their mood and reduced their stress, obviously. And I don't just mean like doing CrossFit 3 times a week. Right. I mean, how much are we moving throughout the day? They say sitting is the new smoking. We're behind screens all the time. And, when you move your body, you create brain-derived neurotropic factors, BDNF, which is like fertilizer for our brain. Okay. And so just moving. And the primary reason we have a brain, the number one reason we have a brain is to control our movement. And I believe as your body moves, your brain grooves. So even if you're doing your calls, from a walk or maybe you're taking the dogs out or something like that, and that's where you're doing your thinking. I mean, I feel like that is so very important. Okay. The D in Meds RX, the D stands for diet. It's probably the only thing that costs money. It's an investment to eat, maybe to even eat well. But did you know that there are certain foods that are just, it supports a greater mood and mental health, certainly greater memory. And so you could put together recipes that are packed with antioxidants, with magnesium, with healthy omega-3s.
Fish oils, yep.
Yeah, to reduce stress and be able to.
The avocado and the olive oil and
all of that. Yes.
Exactly. Because your gut's your second brain, correct?
Exactly. And so that brain gut connection is so very important. Probably the biggest neurotoxin that most of us, indulge in is just refined sugar. Right. And so we could go on all the hazardous, challenges that come from that. But there's so many scientific based nutrient foods that, or supplements that will support emotional wellness. I did a podcast interview with Leanna Warner Gray, and she wrote Anxiety Free Foods. She was talking about certain foods actually reduce stress and anxiety in the human body, like dark leafy greens, like broccoli, kale, spinach, spirulina. There are other anxiety foods, reducing foods, also good for the brain. Yep. Avocados, blueberries, coconut oil, olive oil, turmeric, blueberries. I like to call them brain berries. Right. And these are nutritious, but they could also be delicious also as well. So, when you're eating something, just ask yourself, is this good for my brain or is this bad for my brain? The fatty fishes, certainly, that you mentioned, salmon, sardines, all good. If people want a great video, just search Jim Kwik brain foods, and I actually go through my favorite brain foods. I show people how to memorize them, a little memory trick that if you're going to the grocery store, some people come back and they forget, that thing that they went to the store for. But yeah. And then finally, the S in Meds is sleep. And you and I have had a discussion on this. Yes. I mean, how's our mental state if we sleep, poorly how are we performing the next day? How's our focus? How's our demeanor? How's our mood? How's our temper? How's our memory? How's our ability to solve problems and be creative and write or film or, and you're always on camera. How can you perform when you don't sleep well? And there's so many, studies obviously on sleep, and also just like, whether it's 7 hours or 8 hours or 9 hours, it's more the quality of sleep. Right. Deep sleep, where we're rejuvenating our body, REM sleep, where we're rejuvenating our mind, and getting tested. I have a very severe sleep apnea. It's an obstructive breathing disorder. I stop breathing 250 times a night. Each time is at least 10 seconds. I was at UCLA. It's like, no wonder you're like, it's like somebody coming in 250 times and putting a pillow over your face, so I wake up, I use a CPAP and a dental device. It's all very sexy. But none of it really works for me. So I had to look at
me neither. Right.
Yeah. And I done, that's why I've interviewed the top sleep experts in the world, and I've ended up doing some surgery, and I slept 90 minutes a night total for 5 years from 2010 to 2015. is horrible. And then plus, like I'd be traveling and jet lag and, which just compounded. But the adverse health challenges is like weight gain. We're not sleeping well. Weight gain, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, stroke, depression. I mean, lack of sleep impairs every physiological function. So my favorite sleep hack, go ahead.
I have it. Well, no, go say what you're going to say.
No, I was just going to say my favorite things that help me sleep.
Yes.
In no specific order. Direct sunlight first thing in the morning. Your eyes are the only part of your brain outside of your skull, and it helps to reset your circadian rhythm. So not sunlight through the windows, because that could filter out spectrums of light. But even if you go out on a hazy day, it's very powerful. And it's free, right? And you get fresh air and you get grounded. No coffee past 2 p.m. if you're sensitive to caffeine like I am. Some people could have espresso before they go to bed and they could just that.
I don't get it. Yeah, I've seen those people too. They order a dinner and I'm like, how the hell do you do that?
I'm so jealous of people.
I'm so jealous of those people.
Yeah, it is. And also drinking, like no alcohol. A lot of people use alcohol and they think it helps their sleep, but the science is saying different. It knocks you out, but it doesn't mean you're getting quality rest. Also as well. But the other thing is melatonin production. And so just think about it as a hunter-gatherer, there are two triggers that where you would naturally produce melatonin, which helps you to the hormone helps you to relax and show you that it's time to phase down into rest. It was a decrease in two things, a decrease in temperature, a decrease in light. That's when we know it's time to go to sleep. But today with modern conveniences where you have, lights in every room, temperature regulation for the thermostat, we don't get those same triggers unless we're deliberate about it. So I would say a colder, darker room will help people sleep longer and better. Some people will take a warm bath or a sauna before they go to sleep. The Epsom salt, the magnesium is great for helping you relax. Also, when you leave that bath, your core body temperature drops, which is the trigger to melatonin to be able to sleep. Getting off our screens late at night. I mean, so many people are guilty of looking at the TV, their pad, their phones, their computers, whatever it is. But that blue light, we've heard this before, it fools the mind into thinking it's still daylight. And that's what you wonder why you can't fall asleep. And plus, I don't think the human brain evolved to have the world's information, every single thing. Like through just a few scrolls, we get bombarded with more information than somebody 300 years ago ever saw in their lifetime, right? And so, like, I don't think that that's something that helps you to kind of phase and be able to relax. So those are just some of the sleep.
So here's what I do for what I've learned to do for my sleep. One, I do breath work at night now, right? Because I'm one of those people guilty of, look, I got to constantly check NFL news and this and that, so I'm like, man, so I do breath work, okay, to slow myself down. But then one of the things I learned, from one of my Thai monk therapists that I, met out there, was take a few things during the day. He said, I want you to take something. What happened today that was pretty cool. Okay. And, give me something that was good. So I told him it was good. He said, okay, now what I want you to do, I want you to smile about it. Okay. Because if you smile, that releases certain, chemicals in your brain and your brain doesn't know if it's a fake smile or a real smile. It just releases those chemicals in your brain, right? So he said, smile about it. Then I want you to celebrate it. He said, I want you to appreciate it, then celebrate it. So what do you mean? He said, I want you to throw a party in your heart for 2 minutes. Like, just be so excited that this happened to you today. So you're throwing yourself a little party, okay? And then I want you to do it for 2 more things. So 3 things. So you go to bed having had 3 parties, and you have these things to celebrate, and it'll calm your brain down a little bit instead of those things that you're going to bed with worrying about for the next morning, right? You go to bed celebrating now, and you could wake up having just come back from a celebration, and it's worked for me.
I'm gonna totally try that. I love that.
Right?
It gets you in that parasympathetic. Like we hear about the autonomic nervous system, how this pendulum swings between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetics that fight or flight response, and that's where a lot of work. That's why we don't want to be in that work mode, before we go to sleep. But that parasympathetic is that rest and digest, and anything that puts you in that state where you're celebrating, where you're have gratitude and appreciation for the things. Wonderful way to be able to down regulate, and doing some yoga nidra breathing, anything that kind of gets you into your body and out of your head, and you're not ruminating like you talked about.
Right.
You're not ruminating about work or finances or things that could happen. Yeah,
And that was
very,
my
very
problem.
important.
I was thinking plot and planning, thinking plot and planning, thinking plot and planning.
Yeah.
And I had to get myself off that track if I
Yeah.
was ever going to sleep.
And it takes training to rewire your
Sure.
mind to do it. And we're not always perfect, without a doubt. But there's a quote in my book, Limitless, that it's from a French philosopher. And he says, life is the C, the letter C between the letters B and D, where B stands for birth and D stands for death, and life C, choice. That, it's the choices that we're making every single day. And I do believe that these difficult times can distract us. These difficult times might even diminish us, or these difficult times, they could develop us. We always decide. The last part of meds, the RX, which I got from Brendan Burchard, the R stands for relationships. The power of bonds and a peer group, that we're not alone going through this. I just interviewed Dr. Robert Waldinger, who oversees the Harvard study of adult development. It's the longest study on happiness in the world, just hit 84 years on longevity and happiness. And basically, I asked him, bottom line, when it comes down to happiness and your health, what is the biggest, contributor? Is it diet? Is it exercise? And he's like, actually, it's our relationships. And it doesn't mean you have to be married, or it doesn't introvert, extrovert. That doesn't matter. It's just the bonds that we form, with the people around us. And it just makes sense.
In Unbreakable, I say, find your team.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Yep.
Yeah, yes. Exactly.
Right. Find your team gets us through the gray. Yes.
Yes. I literally just got goosebumps. I call them
Cool.
I call them truth bumps. But yeah, find your team. And so, and then, we all need people, that encourage us, that are kind to us, that tell us what we need, that have our backs and cheerlead for us. And if you haven't found that person yet, my recommendation would be, be that person, be that person for somebody else.
Love that.
Definitely be that person, for you, ourselves. So that's the R in Meds RX. And then the X is just space for all the extras, right? All the extras you want to add to that. Like for me, two things that don't cost anything is just like, I like cold therapy a lot. Okay. I don't know what it is. I met Wim Hof in 2012, 10 years ago, the Iceman. Wow. He had, his stories, he had lost his wife. And he had his kids, and how he would get through it is she would jump into in the cold water, and it would reset his nervous system, increase norepinephrine, a sense of dopamine. For me, it's a reset. It's like a nervous system reset. Cold showers.
I do a cold plunge. I feel like I've accomplished something.
Yeah, and it's hard, and that's the other part of it. I grew up in the Northeast. Don't love the cold, but when you get yourself to do difficult things, it boosts your self-esteem, right? The way you see yourself, it kind of builds a mental toughness. So hopefully how we do anything is how we do everything. We maybe could take it into other areas when we need some grit and some resilience. But cold is great. We talked about heat is great. My favorite things are actually free. While I like all the biohacking and some of the stuff that's out there, all that stuff is really meant to mimic nature. Like for me, I did a show on the 4 elements, and these are the 4 elements like air, fire, water, earth, right? And back in the Babylonian times, ancient Greeks, they used to think that those 4 elements created everything, right? Everything was made of these 4 elements. Well, in my mind, I wake up and I want to get these 4 elements, going first thing in the morning. So what I'll do is I'll go outside, after I use the bathroom, I'll go outside and I'll touch the earth, I'll get grounded, right? Because I feel like, sometimes when I feel anxiety and stress, I feel like I don't have a foundation. And I think touching the ground or sitting on the ground is something that's healing for me. I'll do some deep breathing first thing in the morning. So I'll get my air. So I get earth and air. I'll be looking at the sun, because I'll do that sun gazing, and that's my fire. And then I'll either take a cold shower or drink some water. And drinking water, staying hydrated is so very important for the human brain and our mental health. We can lose up to a pound of water just at nighttime through respiration and perspiration, and our brain is mostly water. So just staying hydrated will boost your reaction time and your thinking speed upwards of 30%. So I'll do some water and some, electrolytes, but that'll be like, I'll throughout the day, I'll be like, how do I get, even during brain breaks, I'm on Zoom too much or whatever. I'll just say, I need a 5-minute brain break. And what will I do? Right. I'll move my body, I'll hydrate, and I'll do some breathing outside, and get some fresh air, and I'll come back refreshed mentally and physically.
Which is, folks, think about this. You never see a fight where a fighter doesn't get to go and sit on the stool and recover for, a minute. And it's the same thing. We need to go sit on our stool and recover.
I love it. No, I love all the sports analogies.
So